Good morning, distinguished audience, and dear Badr, as the heart father of this forum, I have to tell you how honored we are with this opening conversation. My name is Patil Misika. I work for the OECD Development Center. I'm in charge of our work on philanthropy, gender, and work with the private sector, and it is my great pleasure and honor to welcome this distinguished panel. We're going to be together for 45 minutes. I know we're a little bit delayed, but believe me, it was worth it. So, before I introduce my fellow panelists, let me remind you why we're here. We're here, and this is the first time that business and philanthropy come together through a distinct moment at a COP. So I'd like to again salute the effort, the ambition, because this is important. Not one set of actors can do it alone. And so business and philanthropy have to work not only together, but with other stakeholders. And so this is why we're here. We want to hear how did they do it? What's a new way to rethink the equation when it comes to partnerships with business and philanthropy? Is there a new algorithm of partnerships in this era to step up to these challenges at the nexus of climate, development, and nature? So we have seen many different ways in which these partnerships already exist. But what about the 4 Ps, public, private, philanthropy partnerships? This is a term that's emerging more and more. And so we'll hear about that. And finally, as you will hear from our panelists, what are some of the commitments they themselves would like to make, or what would they say if they had to come up and call to action here and now? So let me first turn to Mr. Aliko Dangote, who does not need any introductions, but he is the president and CEO of Dangote Industries Limited. So, dear Mr. Dangote, you hold multiple distinguished positions across business and philanthropy in Nigeria. You are the president and CEO of Dangote Industries Limited, present across 14 African countries, and there's chairman of the Aliko Dangote Foundation. Your work has helped further Nigerian private sector commitments to environmental sustainability. Yes. And you have not done that alone. You have done it through your partners, through various stakeholders. So could you please tell us how, as an Africa-based industrialist, you've addressed this issue of climate change, and how does cement work when it comes to climate change? In addition, I'd like to know how you've managed to reduce the footprint in your business throughout your manufacturing, agribusiness, and energy operations, and how have partnerships played a role in helping you get there? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It is really great to be here, today. Well, what I think we have to do is that we must actually continue to scale up our, priorities, our, response to climate change, and also, sustainability. What we have as, a country, a continent, Africa needs progress, and also this progress cannot really happen without industrial development. And what we do, as a group, we are into a lot of sort of sectors which are very, very vital to the progress and also prosperity of Africa. We're into, let me segment them, we're into cement. We have 55 million metric tons at the moment, and building more capacities. By 2025, we're going to be at 61 million tons of cement in terms of capacity. We're into energy. We have the largest single train refinery of 650 50,000 barrels per day, and also with 1 million tons of polypropylene, 3 million tons of urea, and also we have an upstream oil production 2 blocks which we are operating. And then on agriculture, we have 1 million tons of rice mills with also a backward integration. And we have 1.1 million roughly tons of sugar backward integration and also sugar refinery. And then logistics, we have 12,000 trucks, which are internal trucks to help us move some of our goods. And we still use outside, trucks. So let me, tell you what we are doing. We are really, really very, very committed in terms of decarbonization, in terms of industrialization, in terms of localization to reduce CO2 emission. Let me take you first to cement. In cement, what we are doing, today, we are using a lot of alternative fuel. We have already reached about 16% in terms of usage of alternative fuel, waste, biomass, and other stuff that we're using. And that has actually helped us to save almost about 3 million tons. We're just at about 16%. We are going to be at 25% by 2025. And by 2030, we'll be at about 40% using alternative fuel in all our cement operations throughout Africa. We're in 14 African countries in total in our businesses. And we have offices, around the world, including Dubai, UK, China, India, and, about 14 countries in, Africa, with a projected revenue of about $30 billion by end of 2024, because we've created massive number of businesses, starting from last year to this year in the energy, sector. So what do we have? Let me explain, I've already explained that what we are saving. What we are saving in the, in the cement, I've already said that. Then let me go to the energy. In the energy, as you know, Africa, only 2 countries, Algeria and Libya, are the ones that are not importing petroleum products. So we export all the crude and we import the products in. So what we've done in our own refinery is that we have actually canceled out total of 650,000 barrels going out and, in crude, and 650,000 barrels coming in as product. So when you calculate that, you're going to save almost about 2 million tons of, CO2 emission. And that's a big, because shipping is one of the major polluters. And then the second step, what are we doing again? We're actually producing Euro 5 rather than the Euro 3, which is now being used all over Africa. We're changing the quality to also reduce polluting the environment. And then the entire heat in the refinery, we're actually capturing the heat to generate 50 megawatts of power. So that's what we are doing there. Then you go to agriculture. In agriculture, what we are doing in agriculture, we are using, for example, in the rice, we have almost about 34% of the capacity in Nigeria. 34% means 1 million tons of rice processing mill with the backward integration, which we are helping a lot of outgrowers and co. With this, is actually, saving quite a lot because we are using our own power generation, which is by biomass. So we are using the husk of the rice to generate our power, so which means there is no waste. The same thing with sugar, we are using the bagasse to generate power, and we are 100% off the grid. We generate our own power, we sell some to the grid, and the balance of the bagasse, we use it and mix it with molasses to make animal feed. So these are the things that we're doing, both localizing and co. As of today, we're operating 12,000 trucks. And all these trucks, 12,000, they were all using diesel. But we have already started converting about 2,500 of them, which now they are using, CNG and biodiesel. We just bought another 1,500 arriving in January. So the intention is that by 2030, we'll end up, because of the increased number of business, we are going to now have a total of about 15,000 trucks, which all of them will operate on CNG by 2030. This all part of our own contribution to reduce the CO2 emission. Let me not also forget, as of today, climate change must actually be in the context of the African, development. Yes, we will develop, but if we have to also take it gradually. We are taking it very, very seriously, and we would like to have partnership to make sure that, yes, we'll make this a reality. I mean, today, if you look at it, a lot of children are not even able to go to school because of lack of electricity. 600 million people in the continent, they even don't have light. So we cannot transit right away from fossil fuel immediately into, fossil fuel vehicles into electric vehicles, because we need to make sure we develop at the same time transiting to this and, having, a sustainable, environment. So that's what I have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dangote. So you've raised the importance of localizing. Those are local issues that must be locally led and owned, but they're not a local silo. It's actually across continents, across countries, in a holistic manner and across industries. And you've referred to the social aspect, which is the other side of a coin. Those are not separate issues. So thank you very much. We'll get back to you. To my left is Mr. Bob Sternfels. He's the Global Managing Partner at McKinsey & Company, and I'm extremely honored to have him on this panel. Bob, McKinsey is actively supporting, the green transition through its thought leadership, its advisory services, and its collaboration across business, philanthropy, government, civil society. You're also a knowledge partner of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. So based on your experience, do we need a new partnering algorithm to foster these 4 Ps, public-private philanthropy partnerships? And how can we accelerate such coalitions at scale? Because that's usually where it hurts. Piloting is relatively easy, and then when you have to go to scale, it's a bit more complicated. So have you seen some promising models?
Well, first, I want to just thank you, Patil, for having me and being on the panel with everybody. It's great to be here on such an important topic and a critical question. Maybe before I jump into your question, just when you framed, you also talked about commitments. And I'd start with our commitment. McKinsey's all in driving sustainable, inclusive growth. We've committed and are on our way to investing $1 billion by 2025 on this topic. What does that mean? It means being a founding partner in a 4P model on things like Frontier, which is a collaboration to do advanced market commitments for carbon removal. And Frontier just made its first investment in direct air capture just a few weeks ago. It also means making our own commitments. We're a 2030 net zero commitment. We also, given the amount we travel, we've made a commitment to reduce per person travel by 25% by 2025, and we're on path for that. Is that it? No, but we're on the journey, and we're fully committed. So I did want to start with that. Then to go to your notion in these, I think the full name is too much of a mouthful, so I might use your 4P model if that's okay. is there an algorithm here? Is there a secret sauce? And we've done research on looking at over 50 of these collaboration models, and you do find some things that are keys for success. And first you might ask, do they work? And I think there is argument that they can work. They can work. And if I take one example, for example, I look at the country of Belize that did a debt for nature swap by leveraging public-private philanthropic partnerships, reduced the country's debt by 10%, and protected the largest coral reef in the world. So these things can have demonstrable impact if we can get them right. So then to your question, what is the secret sauce of getting it right? And I will say, look, this isn't necessarily definitive, but we start to see some emerging best practices here. And I would highlight three things to think about. Focus, alignment, and speed. Can we have focus, alignment, and speed? And I'll just double-click a little bit on each one of those, and I'll start with this notion of focus. And I'll steal a line from the ESPN documentaries, which is, remember 30 for 30, right? 30 for 30. And our Global Institute has done some research that said there's 30 key focus areas that would drive 30% of our advancement to getting to net zero. If we can focus on these 30 key areas, we will move faster. So these 4P models should start with some aspect of focus. Are we focused on the places that are going to deliver the highest return first? That's the first aspect. Alignment becomes the second one. In the 4Ps, there are multiple actors here. And it's critical that each of these actors is aligned and gets recognition. So if we think about moving on climate, do the communities that are affected also benefit in this process? Is it inclusive transition as opposed to just transition? When we think about private sector actors, will private sector actors actually be rewarded and get credit as opposed to being ostracized in the process? And it's worth saying, look, how do those commitments get recognized in the markets in which they operate? If I think about public sector players, will they be recognized as global lighthouses for leading the way? And will that drive support in the constituencies in which they represent? And if I think about philanthropic actors, will they be catalysts to drive further giving in this process so that they can be a force multiplier? So how can these solutions actually drive alignment across all four of these so that we create win, 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 win type of solutions? That's absolutely critical in this process. And maybe the last one is this notion of speed. And speed, I would highlight, has one critical component in it, which is this notion of measurement. And if we move from a methodology today that is dominated by estimation to actual measurement, we will move faster. McKinsey believes in this notion of what gets measured gets done. What gets measured gets done. And have we seen examples of this? I'd perhaps point to two. One is if you look at something that just launched from last year's COP27, it's the African Carbon Markets Initiative. And in just the span of 9 months, this has moved to drive $650 million of commitments for carbon credits in Africa. That's in less than a year. Or if I look at the country of Colombia, they moved by 2022, 8 years ahead of their goal, in moving from 13% of the country being protected to 30% of the country being protected. So we can move quickly. And so I'd come back to this notion of if we could think about focus, alignment, and speed. I don't know if that's the full algorithm, Patil, but I think there are at least components in the algorithm.
Thank you, Bob. I saw a lot of people take notes because when McKinsey has a solution to offer, people pay attention. So focus, alignment, speed, and measurement. You said positive sum game. I think it's a really important point. And this debt for nature swap, very interesting. And you also said something that struck me, inclusive. Yes. And we'll come back to that. And I think that's the perfect segue for me to turn to you, Estelle. So Estelle Brachlianoff, you're the Chief Executive Officer of Veolia. And let me do my 10 seconds of French feminism. There's only 3 female CEOs in the top 40 listed companies, so we're so honored and so lucky to have you. Dear Estelle, Veolia's strategy is well aligned with Agenda 2030. You've made climate change so central part and parcel of your mandate, your engagement model. So could you tell us how you've been collaborating with various stakeholders, again, governments, other companies across industries, to help cities and industries adapt to the climate crisis?
I guess I like as well the last word of your introduction, because Veolia is in a very particular situation, because our business is about helping cities and industries to decarbonize, to depollute, and to regenerate resource. And that's why we call ourselves the leader of ecological transformation, which is the global vision of that. And if you deep dive into CO2, for instance, of course, I can tell you through what we do in terms of mitigation. Typically, you talked about local production of energy. That's one of it. And we have many, many other things we do, specifically in the Gulf, for instance, in energy efficiency measures and so on and so forth. That's why I was very happy last year, as well as our financial results, to present 14 million tons of carbon we've helped reduce in our customers' footprint only last year through all our initiatives throughout the world. But I would rather spend a few minutes talking not about mitigation, but about adaptation as well. And as you know, adaptation, the direct thing you may think of is water, because the consequence of global warming is too little, too much, or not at the right time, or not of the right quality type of water. And it happens that we are, a global leader, of course, of the water industry and water technologies. And there are solutions as well. I would concur to what you said. Let's scale them up and let's speed up. That will be the main message for me. Last year only, we've saved in Veolia 320 million cubic meters of water through everything we do, which is the equivalent of the consumption of Singapore, just to give you an idea alone. And how do we do that? And of course, we can do more. And we, not only Veolia, but in a way the world can do more. It's about saving water through network efficiency or efficiency when you consume water at home or within industries, because a lot of water is consumed by industries. It's about reusing wastewater each time you can, as opposed to put it back into a river, into the sea. And it's about, of course, desalination plant and green desal plant when you have no other choice but to go for desal. And if I go through a few examples of those, in the reuse of wastewater, in Jordania, so not that far from here, in our wastewater treatment plant of As-Samra, sorry, I hope I'm not pronouncing it in kind of the right way, we are in charge, in a way, of 25% of the whole country's irrigation through this alone plant. So it can be at scale. We have many, many projects in California, specifically, in West Basin, for instance. We were talking about that a few minutes ago. As you can imagine, California is lacking water as well. I can go through Chile. Chile, I don't know if you realize that global warming is already happening now, as in the consequence of it. The river which goes into Santiago de Chile, minus 75% river flow over the last 10 years. So it's already happening. And we've found a lot of solutions, reuse of wastewater, reduction of, leakage, and so on and so forth, so that we still can provide potable water to the whole city of Santiago de Chile. So those solutions exist, and we need to come together, basically, to scale them up and speed up, because we cannot afford to wait for another 10 years.
Thank you very much, Estelle. So water at the very heart, at the core of adaptation. And what strikes me also, already listening to this, my first 3 interventions on this panel, is the personal commitment coupled with the organizational commitment and acting and working with others to affect the enabling environment. And this is how change happens, on these 3 concentric circles. So thank you very much, Estelle. I'm going to turn to you, Anil. So Anil Soni is the CEO of the WHO Foundation. And the WHO Foundation has been created gathering new resources from philanthropists, foundation businesses, and individuals to tackle the biggest health challenges. And I stole that from you, as I often heard you say, now health is the human face of the climate crisis. So as co-chair of the OECD Net Forward Health Working Group, you've also decided to rename this group Health and Climate. So could you tell us why it's urgent to put this nexus, health and climate, at the center of the sustainability equation, and what role the philanthropic sector could play to accelerate this transition? Because we heard it's about scale, it's about timeliness, and it's about speed. Over to you, Anil.
Thanks, Patil, and good morning, everyone. Let me use health as a way to talk about the motivation for business to act. And of course, if you're in this room, you're already motivated, and also the role of philanthropy. As Estelle just said, climate change is now. The effects of climate change are being felt today, often through natural disasters and severe weather events, droughts, floods, storms like we've never seen before. And as a consequence of that, you have disease outbreaks. The cholera outbreak in Malawi today has actually been linked to the floods in Pakistan. And as a consequence of these health effects, you have migration. People move. Their fields aren't producing as they used to. They need to seek assistance. And as a consequence of migration, you have conflict. So because of all of that, you see climate change in practice through health effects, you see it in conflict, and you see it in your business returns. Business is motivated because you know this is going to affect your supply chains, and you know it's going to affect your customers. It's been incredibly inspiring to be on this panel, but also to be at COPs previously, where I see business leaders doing what governments have been unable to do. While elected officials can't align, businesses know they need to act. And I think one of the reasons is not only do you see it affecting your bottom line over time, you see it as being an opportunity to have a competitive advantage. And to be honest, I'm sure you see it in part because you have children or families and you know how this is affecting them. I think the statistics that we're going to hear this week can be quite numbing. 7 million people die each year of air pollution. Half the planet is living in an area that's going to be susceptible to climate change. It's hard to understand those figures. It's hard to internalize those figures. So I'll share very quickly my experience of visiting a Maasai community last year and meeting a boy named Kasaine. A health worker was assessing the weight and health of children, and I realized that Kasaine was the same weight as my child, but he was twice his age. And Kasaine is going to live with malnourishment and the effects of malnourishment for the rest of his life. Behind every statistic is a story and is a person. And if you think right now about the person in your life that you love the most, your partner or parent or sibling or friend or child, someone's most loved one is being affected today by climate change, and business can act. And what we need, and this comes to the role of philanthropy, is for philanthropy to develop the tools and for the government to help scale and also incentivize businesses. Aliko said something that's so critical, which is that, yes, of course, businesses can act, but we have communities that don't have the basics. They don't have clean water. They don't have electricity. And so that's also a role for philanthropy, to make sure those basic needs are met. So businesses are going to be motivated. Health is one of the ways you're going to see the effects of climate change. So what's the role of philanthropy? And I'm going to speak now again from my experience in 25 years in global health. The last 2 decades of global health have been phenomenal. 1 billion children vaccinated, tens of millions of people treated for diseases for which there were no therapies 20 years ago. Philanthropy has made that possible. Philanthropy can take risks. Philanthropy can develop new technologies. Philanthropy can scale up technologies and then hand it over to the market or hand it over to public finance. That's what philanthropy has been able to do in global health over the last 20 years, and as a result, tens of millions of people are alive today who would not otherwise be alive. There are medicines. A malaria vaccine is being distributed across the African continent right now that was developed as a consequence of philanthropy. So my challenge is, what can philanthropy do for climate and health? And the answer is so much. There are diseases like dengue that are going to be prevalent across the planet as a consequence of climate change. There's a naturally occurring bacteria called Wolbachia that can eliminate dengue transmission. That needs philanthropic investment to scale up. There are technologies, much like there were with HIV medicines, where the price was too high and therefore there wasn't scale up. Now there are technologies associated with clean cooling, which is going to be so important in Indonesia, in China, in India. As temperatures rise, people are going to need air conditioners. That's going to cause a huge impact on driving temperatures up, driving carbon up, but there are technologies that can avoid that. But it needs philanthropy. It needs philanthropy to be able to scale up the use of these new technologies. Philanthropy can help scale up the use of solar on the African continent so people have access to healthcare. So there's a number of ways in which philanthropy can get us started, can take the risk. And I should say, and I think this is critically important, philanthropy has to play a role in meeting the needs of local communities that are being hit by climate change. And this isn't necessarily going to be the silver bullet. Business leaders, philanthropic leaders, they like to look for the catalytic investment where you have high ROI. Yes, absolutely, we need that. And we need to make sure that we're allocating resources to local communities and to indigenous communities who are being hit the hardest, because local knows best. And I was very inspired recently at the Paris Financing Summit, including climate. One business leader at Sanofi said, we're going to put 500 million into going to net zero, 500 million euros, but 10% of that we're going to set aside to make sure that we're giving it to local communities, because they need that assistance right now, and philanthropy can make a difference today. So philanthropy can both make that difference today for the communities that are being affected most, and philanthropy can develop the types of tools and technologies that businesses can help scale, that government finance can help scale, and that can make a difference in climate mitigation and adaptation, for which health is the human face.
Wow, thank you, Anil. Brilliant about philanthropy's multifaceted talents, because people usually think philanthropy is a big checkbook. Philanthropy's role is not just to de-risk, as you said. You've mentioned taking risks, piloting new solutions, engaging in research, in collaboratives, working side by side with other actors. So thank you very much for reminding us of that, and of the many ways in which localized solution, together with local philanthropy as well, because in emerging economies, philanthropy is booming. So I'm going to stay with you, dear Anil, because we have now 1 minute for each of you to come up with the solution. No, I'm joking. To come up with your top recommendation, call to action. So for you, Anil, it would be, what's your call to action for philanthropy to step up its climate and health efforts? 1 minute.
So I'm going to be very personal here. I've been inspired by the Islamic tradition of zakat, and for many years now, I make sure that 5% of my income I give back. My challenge to everyone in this room, because we're on this stage to try to move you, right? And you're going to be on stages later this week to move us. My challenge is very personal. Set an allocation today, before you leave COP. Actually agree, here's a percentage of my philanthropic giving that I want to give away next year. You don't know what it's going to go for yet, and then set a payout date. That's it. And make sure it's a stretch. Make sure if you've given 5% of your endowment in previous years, that next year it's 7 or 8%. The most inspiring talk I've ever listened to on climate change was actually someone who compared our fight against global warming to World War II, and said that at that time, technologies were developed, scale-up was made possible that was beyond the imagination because people stretched. They knew they had to do more than they had ever done before because of the nature of the threat. So my 1 minute, if I haven't already gone over, recommendation to each person in this room is leave COP with a commitment to doing something, and make that something a number, and make it next year, and then make sure you set a payout date so that by December 31st, 2024, you make good on the promise that you make to yourself while you're here.
Wow, I love that, Anil. So I hope you can all make a mental note to go with that commitment. Goes back to our earlier point, it's about individuals as well. The power of giving is not left to just a few. I'm going to come back to you, Estelle. In 1 minute, what would be your top recommendation or call to action on how multinational enterprises can step up their engagement alongside philanthropy and other stakeholders in support of climate change?
I guess a few things. Alignment, we need to have the same goal, and I would call for a net zero water to be our common goal as much as there is a net zero carbon. And how do we do that? By every single of you having a look at one solution which exists somewhere and then duplicate in your organization or in your country, in your, I guess, neighboring, system of stakeholders. And I guess the second one would be don't ask only the private sector for money, ask them as well for efficiency, solution, technology, and innovation, because this is what the PPP or PPPP can bring, so efficiency, innovation, technology, and experience.
Great, thank you very much. So looking in the same direction, same goals, net zero water, and it's not just about the money. We're hearing that time and again. It is also about the money, but it is not just about the money. And if a pipeline of cash could solve it all, we would have found out by now. So, Bob, what in your 1 minute, if you had a magic wand, see, I'm making it a bit more exciting. Would you transform all of us into frogs? No, just us French women. If you had a magic wand, how would you incentivize various stakeholders to engage further in PPPPs?
Well, certainly not frogs. So if I had the magic wand for the 4P model, I'd have three wishes. Maybe that's better than the magic wand. The first wish is come together. Right? We're not going to solve any of these things by not getting together. I think it's one of the magics of things like this, but we have to come together to solve problems. It's the only way collaboration actually starts. So more coming together. The second is reject the notion of or and embrace and. So we talked earlier, Batil, about this idea of inclusion. The solutions have to be sustainable, they have to be inclusive, and particularly for the Global South, they have to enable growth. Sustainable and inclusive and growth, all three. Right? And maybe the last one, and I'll come back to one of the notions that I hit, we don't have time to wait. Speed matters. And so what gets measured gets done. We need to actually move faster.
Thank you, Bob. The time is now. So you've said positive sum game, the end, and the inclusive positive sum game. All of us across gender, geographies, industries, and come together. Thinking of a Beatles song, but anyway, I really like it. Your three wishes shall be granted. Let's meet a year from now if Badr will have us again, and then we see where we are. And finally, Mr. Aliko Dangote, what would be your top recommendation, call to action for African philanthropy to step up and lead the way in big multilateral summits like this one? Because it is way too rare, as I said in the beginning, that we have philanthropy and business as a set of distinguished actors that will roll up their sleeves and collaborate with everybody else. So what's your top recommendation, call to action for big philanthropy in Africa to step up?
Well, thank you very much. You've already had our commitment and track record in terms of the industrialization. In the philanthropic side, I believe we're all doing our various things, and there's nothing that is impossible if we get together. I mean, just like when our foundation with Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, got together, were able to eliminate polio, from Africa. So that we have already achieved. And secondly, what I think we are doing as a foundation, I know that we have so many foundations and they're doing quite a lot of different things, but we are focusing on stopping women, most especially from using wood to generate power to cook. So we're now trying to transit them into gas cooking stoves. That's one. The second one is to now grow quite a lot of trees, and then rather than using candles or using lentils that use kerosene, we want to now have them to be using solar lights. So this, I think, will spend quite a lot of money. We'll have a foundation with the endowment of $1.25 billion. So I think part of it will try and assist so that we can reduce the the environmental pollution in Africa. And I hope each and every one of us will have that same commitment by the time that we leave here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Clean cook stoves for women. And again, you see, philanthropy and business are not in two separate silos, the way you've nicely described it. It's a continuum. So to conclude, I think, first of all, I would like you to give a big round of applause to this, to my panelists on this amazing panel for this opening conversation. A few concluding words. So our data at the OECD shows that between 2013 and 2020, businesses accounted for 74% of all renewable energy investments worldwide. So, business is also leading the way. And 40 of the largest international philanthropic donors give a total of $1.4 billion a year to support climate adaptation and mitigation. That said, on adaptation, there is still room to grow. So we think that, as we've heard, partnerships across these sets of actors have become not necessary, they've become indispensable. And that's the only way to go. And we're seeing an emergence of collaboratives. They're very hard. This is something that AI cannot solve for us. I was thinking on the way that, people are so terrified, but we can't solve this with AI. It can help, but look at us here. It's going to be also human-centric. So I think this is also one of our takeaways from today. But we also have to go further. And I'm so happy Mr. Dangote ended up also telling us about this initiative, because we have not heard enough about gender. That was not, we only had limited time. And because we haven't had enough time, guess what? I'll ask you to come back here at 4, because we have a roundtable on gender and climate, and we will be looking at, how women, which are 14 times more affected in the case of a severe weather event, not 2 times, not 3 times, 14 times more chances to die. So how do we factor in women? How do we factor in a gender lens as we continue our climate conversations? So that's what we will be looking at. And for that, we will launch a call to action on climate and gender for philanthropy. So stay tuned. And I will end with these last words that I think very well reflect the spirit here. You can pretend to care. You can pretend to care, but you cannot pretend to show up. Thank you for showing up, and I wish you a very good rest of the day and of the forum. Thank you.